Jim and Mike, if it's okay with you guys, let's, tackle insurance first. We got our insurance broker, Dwight Van Leer here. And, he won't have to sit around for all the other junk unless he really has nothing extra to do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I guess the first thing that I'll approach will be actually the health insurance aspect for y'all. As you might know, we actually ended up with our second year in a row of no increase in premium. And it really, when you start looking at the demographics of our group, it really is a miracle. I started outlining with the vast majority of our employees are 50 plus. So, and as we know, 50 plus means you pay a lot of money for insurance. And, you know, and so that's one, sir.
Easy time.
Hey, I'm well over 50. And so with that, and then actually then also when you start looking at some of the other characteristics of our group, we way exceed the benchmarks on COPD, and CAD and asthma. So which means that, you know, unfortunately, we're not as healthy as what the benchmark is for most groups. And I analyzed a lot of that stuff, and I can actually provide y'all with a copy of that for your independent review. But the reality is, for us to have made it 2 years and no increase health insurance, I'm quite amazed. My recommendation would be, honestly, for us to take a look at this next year, you know, at least seeing what the market is at the next renewal after this current period. Because I don't think, no matter how much I negotiate with Florida Blue, I don't think I'm going to see a third year of no increase.
What was their offer?
Initially 7%.
They started at 7?
Yes.
What did they, do you remember what they started at last year?
It was, I think it was close to 10 last year. So in essence, we've held off 17%.
I know the state's level didn't increase either this year.
Yeah. And, you know, each one of it, due to the fact that even though we're not a large group in terms of hundreds of lives, but in essence of the state of Florida, we are considered a large group. And so we're rated on our individual merits, and our claims history was actually pretty horrendous. And I was really amazed again that we ended up with 0. But I told them, I mean, I was very candid at the very beginning. I said, look, if y'all give me any increases this year whatsoever, it's definitely going out for bid. So.
Dwight, what about, looking at, HSA plan for the future next year? How do you feel about that? And I think the county's got that plan.
I'm personally on an HSA.
Yeah.
And for those that fund it, it's a wonderful thing. You know, because it's actually a savings account that can be rolled over into the next year for anything that's not utilized. Sometimes where it can be a little dicey is if you went 100% HSA and then the employee doesn't fund their portion of it, then all of a sudden they're going to have this larger deductible. Because it has to have, meet certain criteria to fall under an HSA. It has to have a certain deductible side. And so, we may have to look at the balance there.
How long has the county been on HSA? This first year or second?
Actually, I'm not sure, Mayor, because I don't handle I handle their property and casualty. I don't handle
Okay, I'm just wondering.
the help.
How the employees feel about the service they get with an HSA, that's my big.
Yes.
You gotta have care in the healthcare.
Yeah. And, you know, some of the groups that I know that have HSAs, what sometimes the employer will actually furnish some funding towards the HSA to help compensate, you know, maybe that savings in the first year that you might have to help them build up a little bit of something in that HSA. But I will actually, you know, like I said, my recommendation would be that we actually take a look at various options for this next year. You know, for the next, I should say, for the 24-25 period. And because I realistically, I just don't see, they're not just going to continue to rubber stamp and go 0%, 0%, 0%.
Okay.
Now on the property and casualty, we ended up basically with just under a 20% increase in the insurance this year. I think it was, Mike, am I correct, 19.7?
That's correct.
19.7% increase in our overall premium. And that basically is everything from our workers' compensation to our cyber, general liability, our property, and you know, your public officials liability coverage, employer employment practices liability. So it's everything. So considering that, based on, I know I came into y'all earlier and said, you know, we're probably going to look at a pretty substantial increase. I was kind of impressed that we only ended up with a 19.7% increase overall.
Yeah, because Mike had 50% liability increase budget here, it's actually gonna be, let's just say 20%.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And, you know, I represent the two players, you know, that are really in this market, which is the Florida League and the government. I'm fortunate to represent both. And I just had, you know, where everybody's going through the same thing. So I'm having to discuss with each one of my governmental clients the increases that are going on. And right now, based on the market, there's no way that we would get just that percentage of increase. I compared it with the rates that my other clients are having to pay right now with the other market, and we would actually have an increase in premium above what we are now if we were to make a move to the other market, as well as we would have to, our deductible right now is $5,000 with preferred, and that's taking it up to a $25,000 deductible in the other one. So today, you know, that, and I think I came to y'all when I came to y'all before, and it expressed, you know, that we were going to have some increases in the market, you know, this year. But I also said that really just due to the cost of reinsurance, that really they were both going to be about tit for tat, and that's really the reason. The only thing at this point we would give up if we were to make a change or to go out for bid, you know, to the other market, we would have to give up some coverage, basically going from a $5,000 deductible up to a $25,000 deductible. And another factor is too, like all of any piers, wharves, any of that kind of stuff, that's PTO as they call it. It's items that are out in the open. That's covered right now, and it would be excluded under the other.
Everybody clear on insurance?
Yep.
Feel good about it? Yep. Everybody? Great, thank you, Dwight. Good news.
Well, it was better news. It's, no increase is good news, but
Absolutely.
it was better news than what I had anticipated by far. Y'all have any
I appreciate
questions?
the job you've done, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Getting to zero.
Well, hey, you know, like I said, I don't expect it next year.
Yeah.
But at least it makes your budgeting easier.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Dental, do you ever hear anything on the dental?
That's an employee paid, benefit. I honestly, I have not followed up on that yet. Simply because I've been grinding a lot of this other stuff right now, but I'll definitely get your hand.
Open enrollment, when do we have open enrollment?
Next month.
Next month, open enrollment.
Yeah, we are gonna do open enrollment, the second week of September,
So we
basically in there, so.
have the vision, we have the health, which is like them for our benefit.
Was there an increase, do you know, on, Medicare?
Medicare itself,
Yes.
that's gonna depend on the individual companies that sell the Medicare. Um, The markets that I'm actually dealing right now, I've not seen any notice of increase at this point in time, but it's still a little bit premature because that doesn't open up until November.
Any questions? Thanks, good, sir.
Hey, thank y'all. Anybody needs me, just call. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, Jim and Mike, wherever y'all want to start.
Sir, Mayor, we were thinking wastewater would be appropriate today. We have a lot of items that we have plugged into the budget. Improvements to the wastewater treatment facility. So we still have a lot of unanswered, items from DEP. We're waiting to hear back from DEP on their permitting side on there. But we have put a lot of money into the wastewater treatment facility, for the state of this year. So, I'll let Mike and Kevin tell you.
Yeah, go to page 6. That's the summary for the wastewater funds. And first 5 items, pretty self-explanatory. And then I've got updated cash balances in our wastewater plant trust and distribution and our wastewater grinder funds. And then a summary of the funds that we have available for the ESAD purchase. Then we get into the capital expenses where we can talk about some of the items. So we have general wastewater plant improvements of $80K in the budget, and then we have $500,000 for a Zone 3 spray field. So I'll let Kevin talk about that.
So we're running out of room to put water. We're gonna have to open up at least one field in zone 3. We have 8 zones. So zones 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got those 5 zones open now, and that's not gonna be enough room in the near future. We're at the edge now. So we have to open up a zone. The biggest bang for your buck is to open up zone 3. That would put us at that 2 million gallon a day annual average rate. Gets us below that 50% marker, gets us out of hot water. It's still in woods. You've got pipe running past it, but it's still just woods. So it's got to be cleared. After cleared, you got to run your pipe and set it up. So that's really needs to happen. That's going to have to be a priority because we just don't have the place to put the water leaving. We're running up against that. And the more customers we take, the more priority that becomes.
City years ago, when it had bought additional property, if you go up the intercoastal, look at the power lines on the left-hand side, if you go that way, it kind of follows the power lines back to our existing spray field. But the city bought some property along there for additional expansion on there, so we've got property in place. It just needs to be cleared and then start, it's basically a giant sprinkler there, so. Basically, the need to start the process of mapping it out, clearing it, opening it up.
How close to the canal was that property? To the canal or?
No, sir, it's not all the way to the canal. It's probably at least a good mile after the last piece we on. That portion right against the canal is actually going by the same.
Where the park is in, it's Great Park, I guess, in Highland View, it's kind of directly behind all that stuff.
Each on the right, RV Park Road, go dead end.
Yep.
Uh, 500,000, budget on that. Is the majority of that just for cleaning and getting ready? Cause just laying PVC pipe or sprinkler system, I would think would be.
It's, what we're looking at is, we talked to Philip Jones about what's it costs per acre to clear now. So just over 100,000 of that is just the basics of the prep. But running the pipe and sprinkler heads, that's where the rest of that comes in. It's a lot of pipe. We don't realize how big that stuff is until you get laying on that pipe. It's a lot of sprinkler heads. When we first started this, each sprinkler head was 24. That was per head. There's aftermarket heads now that mimic the original heads, and they run up, about $1,000 a head, so they're a lot less. But I don't want to get short on finishing the field. That's why I put just a little bit of buffer in that $500,000 because it's going to take pretty much all of it. Hopefully it won't take all of it, but it's going to be pretty close.
But Mayor, we've not done any serious budgeting on that to really have an exact number for you, we're just ballparking there to some degree.
Right.
The next item we didn't fund in the budget was sand filters, but we wanted to discuss it because it's a potential issue coming at us, and we'll let Kevin talk about it.
Our filtration, the way that system was set up, it's a polishing filter. Those two filters we have are built to just polish an existing pre-filtered water. So if you had clarifiers, then all that stuff settles out, then those filters are the right filter. But those are primary and secondary filters. It's all the filtration you've got. So we can't reach the standards, the total suspended solid standards with the filtration we've got. What we're doing is we had to shrink our field just to get into the ballpark and stay in the permit. We fight that all the time. So it's really not the design filters for this kind of system. And if we continue with the pond, then we're never going to we'll always be fighting that. The other piece of that is like this weekend, we got blinded by the ferret. So that's sitting on the bottom of the pond. You suck some up every so often, blinds our filters. Sand filters don't go through that. So we shut down, just getting back up. We got back up about an hour yesterday. And now we're finished. Then today we're running full day. We go through this cycle of quarter of our time, we are cleaning and repairing from, our ferret and stuff like that to the bottom of the pond. So sand filters, continuous wash, don't run through that. And sand filters based on what we saw in Tennessee, military reform. So we went over, walked through their system. There's a bunch of different people that make them. The basics of what we need is similar to what they've got already in-house. And the new rules on the 5531 rules for TSS and all the rest of those pumps we have to shoot for, those kind of filtration is one of the big steps of getting there. That's your TSS. So that eliminates your TSS issue that we fight now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes good sense. Just take that. Are we under a consent order to fix that problem?
We don't know yet because our permit hasn't come back. It's possible that when our permit comes back to us, will be under consent order, for, that's one. Right now, we're meeting our standards. It's why we have to have enough field, is that we shrunk our field so we can meet the standards of a smaller field with more, that's what I'm looking for. More perimeter. So we're not 25, we can't spray 25 foot from our perimeter anymore. Now it's 100.
They require a larger buffer.
Yeah, the buffer zones for us.
That's the kind of things you're running into.
So we did that so we can stay within our permit limits. And the permit limits change based on the buffer. So we're kind of the max buffer now. The long term is if we get better filtration, we open that field back up. So then we're not as limited on your volume for the field. So instead of being we just
being filtered.
water. We shrunk our field. We're at a 1.9 MGD plant based on our field. We shrunk it down and now we're at a 1.775 total million gallons a day annual average. So we had to shrink our numbers down based on our field size. So I'd like to be able to get that field back. To do that and to reach the next set of criteria for the state is we're going to have to do better on filtration.
Tell me what your TSS levels are before with the 1.95 versus the 1.75. What's the number?
Okay, so our TSS is what we fight, and that's based on algae. The permit we had prior to this adjustment, we had a 5 part per million max. That was the most we could put out on the field. Outside of that, you reach your permit. We went from 5 to 25 based on shrinking the field. And we meet that fine, but we're running out of room because we had to shrink our field to get there.
So it's a numbers game. Your levels, how many property you got, so that's a big difference between.
That's mighty close to the max too.
So we're pushing the envelope as far as what the stuff we have, the tools we have with what we got now. So we need to focus on bumping this up. And if we put the right systems in place and we don't get a large volume of money from somewhere, go to the plant, which I just can't see it. But we need to put things in place to build for the 2032 regulations that's coming up. Sand filters is one of the pieces. So we have went through and cycled through how do we get this plant to reach that criteria that's come up in 2032. That's one of those things that I've been working on for a while. So how do we get there with, what we got with minimum amount of money? And this is a piece of it.
Talking with our engineers and looking at plants around the area, looking at sludge plants, advanced wastewater treatment. We're being told that they're going to pay about 100 million. New facility for a new facility. Plus, the biggest thing is we hear from these plants that are running like that, they run 24 hours a day. Huge power bills, they use heat. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to get a roadmap for you to figure out.
And more employees.
If you're running 24 hours a day, you've got to have 24-hour day employees, and that's power. Kind of like we run into with the water plant, we brought it on board, Larry has to run that thing at least 16 hours a day, and that's big power, a lot of maintenance.
And then it sounds to me like, and Kevin, don't take this as a collection of.
It is what it is.
You're having to deal with, and for the last 5-6 years that I've talked to Kevin and tried to understand what he does, he literally is playing catch up and trying to stay ahead of the state. Throw a Band-Aid over here, try to stay ahead of the state. Go to a meeting. I know y'all went to a meeting and then he got scolded over in Destin or somewhere not long ago. You try to stay ahead of the state. And just like what you just explained, we really need more land to spray more based on volume. But we can't necessarily do that because we're putting a Band-Aid and tweaking the system to be within the requirements by saying we have a small area. And that way it can permit or or permeate more, and we go about that way. Y'all heard me say months ago, we've got to get the lobbying team assigned this task and put them in a position where DEP understands the city of Port St. Joe wants to do what's environmentally and proper for the surrounding areas. If we don't start making these tough decisions and funding these projects, we're gonna be on national news like they put it down in above Tampa where they had a breach and it went into and leached into Tampa Bay. We don't want to do that. We want to be ahead of it. We want to follow DEP's direction. But we can't really say that we're doing that if we're turning down budget requests that at least are in the direction of us doing our part. And that's a big ask. Was it $2.5 million?
It's a big ask.
And I get it, but Kevin and his team are trying to just stay aboard. They're literally running a plant that probably should have been shut down and rebuilt, 40 years ago. And now we have this massive amount of growth. We're still asking Kevin and his bunch, well, y'all need to fix it. Y'all need to fix it. Stay ahead of it. And we've got to get the $100 million.
I agree.
I think.
I was down in Orlando over the weekend and actually had the opportunity to speak to DEP representatives over there. And I had done some research beforehand, and I'm new on this board, but had done some research and did know that we have these stipulations that we're gonna have to adhere to in 9 years.
Yes.
And their info that I got from them was we need to come up with some type of a plan to say where we can reach out to them, and they're ready to listen. And that's what I got from them, to say, okay, what is it we need? What kind of help do we need to get this thing over? Because it's gonna come, 2032 seems a long way down the road. What has to be done, it's coming up really fast. And there may be some low-lying fruit out there where we can get some help to offset this. But I think we need to start.
Sure. But with the eye on the prize, which is the complete new facility.
Yes.
Applied back in the spring, we put a plan in place, we applied to DEP and we got turned down. You're exactly right, that's what we're hearing is there needs to be they want to see it.
When the lobbyists, that team, they know who to contact. They know who the players are, that kind of funding. I would forego any other request. I take every request that I have on my mind that I'd like to, get the lobbyist team involved in and remove every item and put that as the only thing we ask for. Just trying to get their attention.
You're exactly right, it's time to meet with our lobbyists too. Whenever we finalize this budget, we need to put that request into our lobbyists to tell them, okay, this is what we want you to focus on. Whatever that case.
And he needs to certainly get educated by Kevin exactly what it is that we need, so he can go out there and the county got $38 million, I guess they still got it, last year for water and sewer. I don't know how they're going to use it, but they've had over tours with us for a good long time about partnering with them on the advanced wastewater facility. I don't know how that would partner up. I'm not sure it'd be complicated, but of course we've got all the infrastructure and we could, hopefully split the cost from the plant, but we'd have to be the major player because we are now. And, all of that together, we need to let's put it together.
Yeah, got a lot of questions.
So back to the $2.5 million request.
Yeah. And with the sand filters, how far will that take us in meeting our requirements?
As far as getting your TSS, that's the answer to your TSS, is good filtration. Everywhere else, when they got, a decent quality sand filter, they always meet the mark. So those places are meeting the 5531 rule already.
That'd allow you to expand the fields.
Oh, we need
Using
to,
that, yeah.
we need to expand the fields if we got sand filters.
Eventually. But it's easy enough to do once the filtration's done. Your TSS numbers will be down below that 5 marker. Then it's a matter of a permit modification and you're back to having the whole field. Will we need zone 3 or the rest of the zones? It's coming really soon.
Yeah, I agree with that growth.
Yeah, that's why it's on this list this year is we gotta start hitting that because we're bumping up against it. And I'm not sure what DEP's will tell us, when we get our permit back, but it's, we're bumping up against that number that magic number where they wanted you to do something. That's where we are now. And it takes so long to get these things done, you know, like getting the field prep and ready. That's not a quick thing. That's why I'm starting that. We gotta start turning on this thing pretty quick.
Then we have the next large ticket item we have is another $500,000 for surface agitation.
If I can, surface agitation is kind of what, it is what we're doing now. So we've got 2 pumps, and these are diesel-driven pumps. This is my trial to prove that we can move enough of the surface of the pond to keep the matting from happening. So algae dies, comes up to the top, and that's what you smell. So if we can keep that from happening, we don't have an odor issue. So if we get an odor issue, we're in trouble. And we were told that point blank. So, so far, knock on wood, it's working. You know, the pumps are doing their thing. We've got rented equipment is what we've got now. And it's something that we would run 3 or 4 months out of the year. And in the winter, cooler months, you don't really have that issue. When it's hot, we have the issue. So that's part of what I'm looking at. Surface agitation is, that's going to keep that odor down. It's a lot of money to pay for odor, but it's not a lot. We figure that's kind of what keeps our problem.
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with $500,000 scratch. Moving along. Because I believe that you're correct. That would either solve the odor problem or at least help it tremendously.
So certainly we have $1 million there, and if we're able to manage those expenses, maybe we can escrow some money towards sand filtration at the end of this budget. If we have any excess funds available to do. But those are the 2 large ticket items. And then you can see the rest of the items that are listed for capital expenses for the wastewater plant, and then also for wastewater collection.
Kevin, on your forklift, do we have one out there now that you're using? It's just, getting fastest.
We bought it used, and it's something we use 7 days a week. And what we're seeing is just typical wear from that kind of usage. It's a telehandler, so it's not just a forklift, it extends out. And that's how we get our dumpsters, and grit dumpsters and stuff like that. That's the tool for that.
I think we need to find a way to put it in the budget. Sitting out there at 120,000. At a critical plant out there that needs all the help they can get. Mike, any juggling and in budget items that.
Yes, the juggling would come from those 2 $500,000 items. You know, I don't know that we have a clear understanding of those costs, whether or not there's 120K in either the zone 3 expansion or the surface water agitation, whether you can squeeze 120,000 out of one of those 2 items.
There's potential out of the surface agitation if DEP will let me pour a slab and put a diesel pump, kind of like what we have now is a temporary. If you make that a permanent diesel pump, then the cost is probably get both out of that $500,000. It's potential.
I think we need to try to put it in there.
And I think,
Thanks, you guys.
yeah, what we're waiting on is to find out what DEP's gonna do with that permit. Once they give us what they're gonna allow in this permit, not allow in there, then
Then you know how to
the
address. Yeah, I mean, we can pull 60,000 from each one of those and put it back in, absolutely, yes, sir.
And then at the end of the day, when you actually bid these projects out, if you wanted to pull, they're still gonna be in the same fund. If you wanted to pull one of them out, you could do that to be able to award a bid.
We're just, kind of betting on the com right now with DEP.
Yes, sir. So hopefully, I suspect we should see something within the next 60 days.
Now, we just leave our 2.5, and hopefully, Lobbyists can find a way to get it.
Well, I'm still a bit confused and concerned to an act. Right now, we're approving a budget, discussing a budget that hopefully be approved. Are we saying that we're just gonna leave that out of the budget, not fund it, and then just hope solely that our lobbyist finds the 2.5?
Well, the thought process was you have $1 million in this year's budget that we're gonna solve a couple of problems, and then next year we'll be able to put that $1 million towards sand filters. Next year's budget.
Or something else to think about, we're working with the state revolving fund right now, we're finding out it's getting harder and harder to get money, but they still have loans that with very low interest rates on there. So what I would suggest is two things, for you lobbyists, if that's what you think you want to do, but also as a backfall too, let's look at the state revolving fund. Because if we can get a 30% off of it and 1.2 loan that you currently have at this area too.
Does that plan meet needs and requirements, what you envision happening in the next year?
With this coming year.
And my thoughts are, it takes over a year from start to finish to get the plant, that piece of the plant up. It's not something they do in a couple of months. It takes a while. I don't really know how to get from here to there and then tell you guys how to get there. We need it. We could use it yesterday or this past weekend. So the sooner the better as far as its filtration. The other half of that equation is if DEP comes back as with this permit and says, you guys got to do something different, then we may have to change our direction and look for different money or, build something a little bit different. I don't know which way to go until this permit revision comes back, says this is what you have to do. And this is the time frame you have. I would expect that we're under consent order when we get this permit to fix some of these things. The volume of the field is one. I'd expect that to come back saying we have to do that in this permit cycle. I don't know what else you're going to throw in this. All I can say is the sooner we can get better filtration, better off we're going to be. And that step ahead, we're fighting this thing like this weekend. We were out fighting the filters again this week. We're fighting those filters every couple of weeks. We're down, we're fixing, it's
just small filters.
So even if we approved it in this coming budget cycle, it would still be a year to actually implement the filters.
correct.
Yeah, see, there's a year of the 9 gone.
Right.
That's what concerns me.
What if we ask the lobbyists for a big ask or, new plan? And then maybe they can fall down somewhere below that ask. But, county asked for it, got 38 million. I don't know why we couldn't ask for 50. We have a plan. We actually need to do something. They can just sit on it.
Right now, we're kind of at the mercy of what DEP is going to tell us with our new permit.
Yeah, so we'll just.
Any feedback at all from DEP of how long a weekend this is gonna be. And with us being in budget,
It's been back and forth. We keep getting these requests for additional information. So right now, there was one that was sent back to Philip that wanted some additional information. I think Philip's got what he needs from Kevin, but I think there's a couple of questions there. It's a dialogue right now back.
sometimes you can evaluate some of those questions or come back, or Philip in, to have a general idea of what they're gonna come back. There's a reason why they ask certain questions.
The last permit cycle, it's 5 years permit now, we wrote extension for it was over 2 months to get the little things ironed out before they actually gave us our permit. I would assume it'd be in that 2 or 3 month period, looking at what I see now. And that's just an assumption.
What about the idea that we put some of the money into this budget? Yeah, and then we plan to put, then we would know this time next year if the obvious team was successful or not, and anticipate having to fund, more money in the following year budget.
Well, certainly our sewer fund is the healthiest. I mean, the growth that we're seeing on the Cape and adding Beacon Hill, we've had substantial growth in those numbers. I certainly can go back and revisit the calculation and estimates that we use for the income that's going to be brought in from Beacon Hill and all these new customers that we're adding. We try to take a conservative approach to our revenue projections for the next year, but certainly we can revisit those projections and see if we can squeeze out a little more aggressive revenue approach for next year.
That's what I would maybe shooting for the mark of half, maybe 1.25. Yeah.
So I'll dig deeper into our revenue projections for the sewer fund and the new customer base that we're adding in Beacon Hill and all of the ESAD system, and the growth numbers out of the Cape and see if we can't.
And the savings that we are anticipating on turning down the $800,000 part of that bid, and then having city workers do that, about $800,000 savings.
Yeah, but that's a wash. That's
Okay,
grand.
so that generates.
But yeah, we can be a little more aggressive on calculations and bring back to you for discussion at the next meeting.
I think it best advice for you right now is kind of generalize this until we get a roadmap to DEP. We don't know exactly these items that are going to be satisfactory. We may have to do 1, 2, or 3 of these items. You just don't know that.
Yeah, I think I used like a 4% growth rate with the sewer revenue, so we can look at those numbers. So what I'm hearing is work to add the forklift into the budget and see if we can squeeze out some funds available for the filtration.
Right.
For this end.
Do you have any minutes?
Kevin, did you have anything else?
That's my big ask. I appreciate it.
And then a wastewater collection, John, did you have?
I was gonna mention, we have the Cape Fund. And that might be a good deal.
Yeah,
And I'm saying that because if we don't have that, then we can't have the collection.
Great.
So
With the Cape Development Fund?
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, Yeah, that was actually earmarked for the purchase of ESAD.
That's true. That's another piece of the puzzle. Let us take a look at the ESAD cost and see with our reserve funds, if there's anything that would make sense, as John suggests, to apply
Maybe
towards.
another fund.
Yeah, I keep hearing that from John, Mike, Jim. There's potential on the Cape if we can go ahead and apply ourselves and run those lines out there. Very big tie into.
But until we get him whole, he's already
Gotta have
whole,
place to
we're
put it.
just about,
See, that's the max.
so we gotta get him better before we can start.
Before you can start adding, before you start rushing to tap in.
One day you run the fear that DEP says no more would maxed out. Maxed out, yeah. That's what we're going through.
There's another piece in John's puzzle that he's generous, he can shift over to Kevin to help, is that we do have $880,000 in grinder fund, in that grinder fund, and we currently don't use those funds for current purchases, we're just escrowing those dollars.
Now, that's set aside for just what it says, so be cautious.
Wait, explain that to me.
So we collect $5 maintenance fee and we escrow those funds. And the fund is listed on page 6, is $883,000 in that fund today.
It was established to replace grinder pumps as they fail.
It's insurance.
It's an insurance policy.
So we currently just purchased, we have the purchase of this coming year's grinder pumps in the budget, and we don't use those funds. So I've got $383,000 for motors and pumps and motors. And we don't use that 880 to offset that 360 that's in John's budget.
So you could have.
How much money did you take out of that grinder fund in the current budget we're on?
We haven't taken it out of any budget. That's
How
what we're
much
saying.
money did you take out of the year before that?
No, that's what I'm saying,
That
we're
is,
just.
that is since inception, since we started that fund, that is the total amount that's been put in there. Even as bad as Hurricane Michael was, we were able to have enough revenue to be able to cover those costs, and it's been put into an escrow.
Those funds are available, and we just covered the 380,000, 360 in our budget. So we don't use
But
those
potentially, you
escrow
can take
funds.
some money out of
It'd be fine with shifting 750,000. Help Kevin's build it.
I think that might be a little aggressive because we don't know if we would have an issue.
Half 500, I think, come.
Yeah.
I think it'll probably save about $500,000. if
Yeah,
you want to do that.
$500,000, there we go.
I think it's something to really think about.
You know, when you're running those numbers, keep that to the side and we'll, we'll.
That's a good idea. We'll discuss that internally and we'll recalculate those numbers and see if we can come back with something in it.
Because what you could do, hypothetically, you could take that money out of that escrow account, use that as a revenue source for this year to cover those O&M, costs on there, the $300,000 you're showing it in and out for your revenue versus your expense. That frees that money up in that account to be able to do that. We can do that. So that's a good idea. Somebody do a little, something like that.
No. Again, that's why we've always been conservative and reserve and savings and try to build up.
Rainy day funds in case we need it. Yeah.
Yes,
So
sir.
this is urgent.
Yes.
I mean, it's not just tied into what DEP is requiring on you now. This all hinges on our new growth plan for utilities to these other areas,
We have
which is going to be a direct impact on top of what you're already facing.
There's 500 homes in Blue Martin alone.
I agree.
No,
We need to.
this is one of the biggest
Look at
items we
that
want to
over.
talk about, was this wastewater plant, because we know there's a lot of moving parts on there, and we've got to make some decisions coming up.
These are decisions we know we need to make even without hearing from DEP yet. So,
We're ahead of the curve. Yeah, trying to get ahead of it. All right, let's just decide when our next budget meeting's gonna be, and, I mean, we've got some other, we got Larry's group, and we've got others we need to talk about a little bit.
Tentatively scheduled for the 22nd.
What we have, let's see where we're at today. We are on the 15th, so yes, so next week is an open week. So tentatively, we have you set up for next Tuesday at noon, at regular time, if that works for you.
Say again.
Next Tuesday, the 22nd at noon.
I'm fine with that. Okay.
That way you don't have any other meetings of that.
I will be out of town until that afternoon on the 22nd. I can do it on the 29th.
I think we have another one.
What about 23rd? Wednesday, 23rd?
I'll be here.
What about the 20, Mike's got to go to a class for FEMA
Okay.
as a requirement. What about the 24th at noon? Does that work? 23rd? That's on a Thursday. Thursday work?
I've got a company and I'm out. I mean, I can meet like at 9 o'clock in the morning. I mean, anything after 9, I'm out on that, on the
What day
rest
will
of
you be back, Commissioner Hopper?
I'll be, back late Tuesday,
Late Tuesday.
the 22nd. I'm
And
available.
Mike is out on the 22nd and 23rd in Tallahassee.
What about,
Why don't
you're
we
gone
meet, why don't we just meet in the morning then on Thursday?
the 24th?
You're back, we can do it before you leave. I'll be here.
I'm not going anywhere, I'm just about an hour and a half on Tuesday morning. Thursday,
Yeah.
excuse me, Thursday.
10 o'clock?
9
9 o'clock?
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
That's good, man. We're planning on hopefully, preps and like that and here. All right.
It's Thursday, the 24th at 9 a.m.
All right, let's take a break and,